Unit 1, Lesson 3, Minorities in the Civil War. Unit 1, Lesson 3, Minorities in the Civil War. Men of color, to arms, now or never. This is our golden moment. The government of the United States calls for every able-bodied color man to enter the Army for 3 years' service and join in fighting the battle of liberty and the Union. This was a common advertisement in Northern newspapers during the Civil War, and even a few Southern newspapers. African Americans in the Civil War. The 54th Massachusetts Regiment was the first black infantry regiment of the Union for the Civil War. It was composed of volunteers who signed up to fight against the Confederate forces, led by Colonel Robert Shaw, shown here in the picture storming Fort Wagner, unsuccessfully, in one of the deadliest battles of the Civil War. The overall success of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment caused many Black Americans to join the Union Army. The Bureau of Colored Troops enlisted nearly 200,000 black soldiers during the Civil War. The Bureau was led primarily by white officers, though they had some black non-commissioned officers who served as sergeants amongst the men. The first black commissioned officer in the Union Army, pictured to the left, was Major Martin Delany. The highest-ranking black officer in the Union Army during the Civil War was Major Alexander T. Augusta, who was born in Virginia to free parents. He was a field surgeon and the first black professor at Howard University in Washington, D.C., and after the war became the first black president of Freedmen's Hospital. The Underground Railroad was a network of secret routes from southern slave states to free northern states or to Canada, with a few routes going from Louisiana and Texas south into Mexico. Between 1810 and 1850, over 100,000 slaves were freed on the Underground Railroad routes. Harriet Tubman was an American abolitionist and social activist. She was born a slave, but escaped to freedom herself on the Underground Railroad. After securing her freedom, she led 13 missions to free Southern slaves and saved over 70 lives. Now, we'll watch a short video on a little-known route of the Underground Railroad, one that took slaves from Louisiana and Texas south to free Mexico. Mexican Americans and other Hispanics, like Puerto Rican and Cuban Americans. Most Hispanics were loyal to the South during the Civil War. They wanted to stop Western expansion of the Union. Over 2,500 Mexican soldiers fought for the Confederacy, while some Hispanics were loyal to the North, who wanted all men to be free, but less than 1,500 soldiers fought for the Union. Women in the Civil War. Women were not directly involved in battle during the Civil War, as women were not allowed to enter the military, but they did contribute as war effort supporters. Prior to the Civil War, nursing was a male-only profession. After news of Florence Nightingale, a British nurse, spread throughout America, women were seen as essential for the war effort, acting as nurses in and around the battlefields. Some women served as spies. Isabella Maria Boyd was a Confederate spy who used her position in society to gain valuable insights into the Union Army. Vivandières were women who served as a traveling support group for the war effort. They followed closely without engaging in battle and offered services to the soldiers, such as hot baths and food for those who could afford to pay. Social life in the North and South during the Civil War would never be the same. In the northern states, the rationing of crucial materials for the war effort left many families without essential materials. Women took on male responsibilities and roles. The prolonged isolation due to intense battles nearby left many families in fear. And the lack of medical supplies, of quality food, and household supplies caused many to flee to neighboring states. In the southern states, villages, cities, and towns were utterly destroyed. Confederate currency was now worthless after the South's surrender, and all Southern banks collapsed, causing the Southern economy to enter a local depression. Sharecropping arose shortly after the end of the Civil War. It was an agricultural phenomenon similar to slavery in everything but name. Southern plantations, formerly worked by slaves, were now worked by freed slaves. Freed slaves were given 30 to 35 acres of land, but had to borrow tools, seeds, and money to work the land. The landowners owed half or sometimes more of the crop yield from the sharecroppers. The landowners paid sharecroppers in materials, not money, once their crop was harvested. Sharecropping facts. The most common crops grown were cotton, tobacco, and rice. The initial sharecroppers were former slaves, but eventually over 2/3 of all sharecroppers were poor white families. High interest rates from most landowners kept all sharecroppers in a state of perpetual debt, with unpredictable crops leading to bad harvests and bad yields. Many families fled due to the rising debt and were subsequently hunted down by state police and agencies and forced to return to the land and continue working with no chance of paying off the debt. And now for a short video on sharecropping before we begin our final activity of the week. Now, we'll work in our table groups to read the portion of a sharecropper's contract and answer the questions on the handout you have. This activity will take the rest of our class today.